Welcome to our first ever Healthy Parks, Healthy People Europe surgery. And being the Healthy Parks, Healthy People part of the EUROPARC Federation, of course, we like to keep all of our aspects with a health and nature orientation, hence why we've called today's session a surgery. And a surgery is really a place where you go to get some advice, to get some information, or indeed to get some help from a health professional. Well, I'm not quite sure we would want to necessarily set ourselves up as the experts in Healthy Parks, Healthy People, but we certainly have got some expertise that we want to share with you today. The purpose of today's event is very much an open dialogue. This is not a webinar. We're not here to present, some finished piece of work for you. It's about how do we move from a position of sort of conceptualizing and thinking about the need to connect health and nature to actually doing it on the ground. And certainly from a EUROPARC perspective, when we're working with our parks and protected area colleagues, usually the most important question that's asked of us is how. Okay, I get the why I should do this. We've passed that stage. How do I do this? And we're going to present to you this morning some ideas that we've gained from inside the Federation and from projects and other programs that have been working, just to share that with you, with the view to that being an inspiration and an ideas generating opportunity, so that we can collectively as a community go forward and look about how we can develop new projects and programs across our community. Because what we're trying to achieve here are happier, healthier people who are connected to nature, and certainly through parks and protected areas. So I hope we're all feeling by the end of the day a little bit happier, and perhaps even a little bit healthier as well. Because we are, of course, seeing a real tangible loss in biodiversity across Europe, despite our best efforts in the parks and protected community. Yet our sedentary, urbanised lives, for which is the norm for the majority of our fellow Europeans, are contributing both to an endemic, in mental and physical health issues and problems, which is increasing health inequalities across our societies. And we really see our fantastic network of parks and protected areas as a real opportunity to not just bridge those health inequalities, but to take this opportunity to help people to reevaluate their relationship with nature and to value nature, and thereby ensure that at the parks and protected areas that we represent have that sort of investment in their biodiversity, and we can look at the issues around biodiversity loss and climate change as well. So it's a sort of an all-encompassing conceptual programme, our Healthy Parks, Healthy People Europe programme, and you'll hear from Pete and others who will explain just in summary what that programme is all about. I say it was one thing for us to create this conceptual programme and say, well, this is what we seek to address. But last year we were able to turn that into a toolkit, so trying to answer some of those how questions. And as I said, you'll hear just from a few inputs in a few moments about just some of how that's being done in different parts of Europe. Then we're going to open up the discussion to hear some ideas from you and to really begin to look at project opportunities and other aspects that we can take these ideas forward. So that's it as for an introduction from me. I'm going to hand over to Pete Rockcliffe now from Nature Scott, who chairs the Healthy Parks, Healthy People Europe Commission within the EUROPARC Federation, basically to take over the reins from here, Pete. So I'll hand over to you for now.
Thanks, Carol. Morning, everyone. Nice to see some new and old faces, or familiar faces, I should say, on the screen today. So I'll just try and share my screen. As Carol says, I'm going to sort of set the scene, and then we're going to have 3 very short presentations from parks and protected areas who are trying to put some of this into practice. And then we'll move into a discussion session, and we'll see where we get to with that. Can I just get a nod that you can see my PowerPoint? Yep, grand. Okay, As Carol says, we have launched a program called Healthy Parks, Healthy People Europe. Hopefully it will be very familiar to a lot of people around the table. We launched it in June 2020, seems longer ago than that already. It draws inspiration from a global program and leadership of park agencies in places like Australia and the US, but is based on the interest, concerns and practice that has been developing across Europe for the last 10 years. As Carol has said, our vision in this slide, as presented on the slide, is happier and healthier people, more connected to nature-rich parks and protected areas. And there's a key yin and yang to the healthy parks, healthy people, good for people, but also good for nature. And bringing those two things together is really important in the context of COVID-19, green recovery, and of course, the climate and nature emergencies that we're very familiar with. The program's built around 4 pillars, 4 elements or components, which have become, which are really important for parks and protected areas and national agencies such as NatureScot, but maybe in different ways. First of the pillars is about making the case that actually nature does contribute to health outcomes, making the case that we should be interested and involved in doing some of this work too. And actually a lot of that is about exemplifying the benefits that already exist for people who are connecting with parks and protected areas. Another key element or pillar is around building partnerships, new partnerships in the whole, particularly with the health sector, but also other sectors such as education, transport, local authorities, etc. Looking at our own organisations is a really important pillar about developing capacity and practice. We are definitely not health experts or health agencies, but we need to have understanding about the health outcomes that we're seeking, and we need to find that common language and capacity in the organisations to actually do some of this stuff as well. And then the final really important pillar is around connecting people and nature through what we would call in Scotland green activity programs, and we'll hear more about this, but it's basically what parks have been doing for a long time around facilitated groups and activities, and also general promotion of these areas for people, but with the important focus of producing specific health outcomes. As Carol has mentioned, this programme draws on good practice that is developed by national agencies and parks and protected areas across many parts of Europe, including within the Commission, but not exclusively within the Commission, Belgium, Netherlands, Finland, Spain, Scotland, and the rest of the UK and elsewhere. There's a lot going on, and we've captured some of it in the case studies and a refreshed toolkit, which we published last year and illustrated on this slide. The common elements of good practice that feature in that toolkit. They range from policy, having a national policy framework, making sure that health is integrated into park plans and strategies, and site management plans too, all the way to practice around communication, staff training, how we reach new audiences, how we develop partnerships with health sector, how we put on green exercise programs, and importantly, how we monitor and evaluate them. Of these, a lot will be familiar to park managers throughout Europe. Where we have found particular challenges are around more targeting of green health programs, monitoring and evaluation of health outcomes. And these things can be, of course, difficult to integrate and develop within existing work and budgets. HPHPe requires leadership and commitment at all levels. Over the last couple of years, we've been frequently asked, what is the first step that a park or protected area needs to take on this journey? There is, of course, no one answer to this, but we do know that projects can play a key role in developing practice to explore how healthy parks, healthier people type approaches can be delivered in practice. It's therefore great that many more parks and PAs are actively thinking about new projects or have started them. We're keen to encourage more of this, hence a roundtable today and other things we have in the pipeline in the Commission. On this final slide, I've listed some specific elements we think are most relevant to build into this new project activity that's emerging. A clear focus for most projects will be green health activity of some description, healthy walks, green volunteering, etc. From a Healthy Parks, Healthy People Europe perspective, these programs need to be designed to deliver specific health outcomes, as I've mentioned. So therefore, delivery in partnership with the health sector is critical. And what we really want to see in these programs are them adopting what we call the 5 Ways Well framework, which delivers both for people and nature. So that's activities which help connect people with nature, improve their physical health and mental health, but also encourage participants to think about nature, to learn about it, and also to give back to nature. As I've mentioned, how we monitor and evaluate health outcomes also needs further development, as does communications, how we talk about these projects and how we promote them within our parks to policymakers, politicians, and the public. Another key dimension, and probably the last one I'll focus on, is how we address training capacity needs of our organisations. While unsuccessful for now, we developed and submitted with partners, including EuroHealthNet, an Erasmus application on this topic with a view to providing an online wide resource for members to use based on the toolkits. I think we were unsuccessful by a couple of points, so we will try again with this application when the next window of application appears, but we are looking for partners for that again too, and we'll need to consider how this work would complement or add to other projects now in development, which we're about to hear about. So I hope this brief introduction sets the scene for the discussion today. I'm really interested to hear what you've got to say about the projects you're thinking about or how are developing. To help bring the issues and opportunities that I've been discussing alive, we're now going to hear a little more from 3 projects that are in various stages of scoping and development, beginning first, again in Scotland. Over to Dan Jenkins from the Cairngorms National Park and NHS Highland. I'm delighted to say I think he's one of the first health professionals we've had come and present specifically on this topic in EUROPARC. So welcome, Dan. No pressure then.
Glad to be blazing a trail there. Thanks for that, Pete. Okay, I'll share my screen and shut yours off. Okay. Okay, so that should be up if someone wants to give me a quick nod. Great, okay, thank you for that. So, yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Dan Jenkins. I am the Strategic Green Health Development Manager for the Heritage Horizons Cairngorms 2030 project. A couple of colleagues with me today, Louise Emsley, who is the kind of Green Health Ranger stroke link worker posted within that project, and Adam Streeter-Smith, who's the Recreation and Access Manager for Cairngorms National Park Authority. Unfortunately, myself and Louise need to nip off quickly because we've got our community steering group for our project running at 10 o'clock our time, that we've got quite a lot of big kind of decisions and progress things that we need to do, but we're really glad that we could kind of pop in and catch the first part of this as a presentation. I'm going to run quickly over a few background slides to put the project into its wider context, and then move on to the more kind of specific health delivery aspects of the project, and particularly the bit that I'm doing. The project Heritage Horizons Cairngorms 2030 is supported and funded through the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And I think the subtitle there kind of really captures it for me. It's all about people and nature thriving together. That's the essence of the project. There's a lovely Gaelic word that's provided quite a bit of inspiration for this project, dúchas. And that dúchas represents that deep-rooted connection between people and nature. And it's this dúchas that we aim to nurture in order to empower people towards involvement in their environment. Okay. It's also worth checking out. There's a really good short film, about 3 minutes long, on the Cairngorms National Park Authority website that gives an overview of the 2030 project and also describes this kind of concept of dúchas. So check that out, it's really good. It's also a large-scale project. and it aims to not only kind of deliver on a broad range of topics, but also create a kind of legacy and an inspiration to other projects and communities across the country and further afield. So we know that in order to achieve that, we need to be transformational, we need to be innovative, and probably most of all, we need to be collaborative. And you can see here just from this work, the collaboration is a major part of the project. It's bringing together a huge range of different partners from different sectors, different perspectives, with different needs, bringing different contributions to the project. And so that whole collaborative approach is really key to EUROPARC in there as well. So how are we going to try and go about this? So there are 24 projects in play in the wider Cairngorms 2030 initiative, delivering meaningful action on the ground in a number of different areas. So there's work around empowering communities, working with communities around decision making, around involvement, and kind of supporting those structures that really kind of bring that connection to community and empower people to become involved. We're looking at how we change the way people move and transport themselves, travel around the park. So around sustainable travel projects, sustainable public transport projects, active travel routes, e-bike networks, things like this to really kind of support both kind of residents and kind of visitors to the park to be able to move in a more sustainable and healthy way. We're also looking at transforming the way that the landscapes are managed across the park and bringing in the different interests and perspectives there, from kind of forestry management to deer management to kind of path management. So all those kind of aspects of how we use the land to support the interests of the different people who are experiencing the park. And fostering healthier and happier communities. So it's about having well-being and connection at the absolute kind of heart of that process. And that's what I'm going to be kind of focusing on kind of more in my bit. And that's the part of the project that I'm particularly involved in. So when we talk about fostering healthier, happier communities, it's about using approaches that create well-being, but through both economic and public health solutions. Okay, so we're looking at working with local business to create what we're calling a well-being economy, which you may kind of know about, but it's really effectively looking at an economy that serves people rather than people striving to serve that economy, and how that kind of sets up the foundation for kind of health and well-being across communities. We're looking at developing an NHS green health referral program, a specific kind of nature prescription program. That's what I'm going to talk about most. I'm also creating a unique outdoor dementia activity resource centre. They're currently refurbishing one of the buildings in the Cairngorms National Park to create a fantastic activity centre. This project was born out of a TP project. People with dementia coming along and having experiences outdoors, just running a TP outside, and they're starting up that again while the building is being refurbished. But a fantastic centre and a unique resource for people living with dementia and their carers and families. I'm also generally encouraging people to kind of walk and cycle more in the park. That links to transport, it links to health, links to some of the stuff that Pete was talking about a minute ago. So the real focus is around, for me and my role and Louise, is around developing this kind of NHS green health referral program. So it's looking at that kind of pathways to kind of prescribing health. And whilst we are employing innovative and transformational methods in that, it's also really important to build on the learning and the experience that happens already or has happened in this area. So Highland Green Health Partnership has been working to nurture links between nature and health and well-being in this area for about 3.5 years through the Think Health, Think Nature programme. It's worth checking out their website too. It's really good, thinkhealththinknature.scot. And this is part of the wider Scottish Government's Our Natural Health Service strategy led by NatureScot. And there's 3 funded green health partnerships across Scotland, ourselves, Dundee City, who have a green health prescription service and have done, and North Ayrshire, who are also developing a comparable approach, and also kind of Lanarkshire have embedded there, so they're not receiving the funding anymore, but they're still very much part of that Our Natural Health Service network. And there's lots of really good collaborative work around developing responses to health and kind of nature prescribing opportunities. And there's also been a lot of work through things like RSPB. You'll know they had their nature prescribing service in Shetland and more recently in Edinburgh. So it's about capturing that learning but taking it forward. And the really key underlying principles with this are really firmly embedded around reducing inequalities. There was some research from CPRE, the Countryside Charity, last year, which revealed a perception that national parks are an exclusive, mainly white, mainly middle-class club. It's really easy to slip into an assumption that just because someone's resident in a national park area and surrounded by an amazing environment, that they're able to access it and benefit from it. But within this project, we're striving really hard to benefit people who don't necessarily have the money, the kit, the transport, the confidence, the knowledge, the connection to be able to participate as what they currently perceive as outdoor activities. There's a strong emphasis around inequalities. And it's about starting where people are at. It's their doorsteps, their confidence levels, their circumstances, their motivation. And we're looking across 3 levels of intervention of things like self-referral, which is very much kind of self-led, information giving, self-managed, supported self-referral, where there's more kind of direct contact and support for maybe kind of a link worker, specific kind of training, linking people to more specific health promoting activities. And then maybe direct referral, which is maybe around more complex health conditions, has more around kind of safeguarding vulnerable people, and involves kind of more kind of intensive support. But each one of these levels of support to get people to feel confident in interacting with nature are really important when we're putting together this kind of nature prescription program. And it's also about embedding it in sustainable practice. So we're working with primary care to develop a guideline within their electronic systems that allows that referral to go through with an actual button to press that says nature prescription, as well as orthopedic or whatever it might be. Also working with secondary care to navigate multiple systems. It's not easy in the NHS. We've got lots and lots of different systems that different healthcare professionals use, and we need to be able to track across all of those to make it meaningful and embedded for people's care. It's about creating norms, not exceptions. It's not the occasional person who may be able to benefit from this. It's integrating it into the way we're thinking about delivering healthcare and enabling people to connect to the positive impacts of kind of nature and the outdoors, and trying to shift prescribing practices from lower pharmaceutical intervention to more kind of nature-based intervention, and being able to track that eventually and show that actual causative link rather than just a correlation. It's also really important that we're connecting with local communities. So we have this strong local network of community-based organisations, and that involves people who are providing those opportunities, but also those agencies that are supporting people to access those. So those community links, those community networks are really, really crucial. And Pete mentioned already about training and confidence, and a shared understanding across those both statutory and community networks of what we're trying to achieve and how we're trying to achieve it. And ultimately, again, it's around capturing those outcomes to be able to tell the stories. If you want to find out more about the wider Cairngorms 2030 project, there's a website link. I think it's probably my time up, so thank you very much. I'll stop sharing my screen. And I mentioned earlier, Adam Streetsmith is going to be around to kind of help out with the conversations after the thing when we next happen as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give you a wee update.
Thanks, Dan. That's great. And we all saw that your next meeting is your colleagues at your next meeting are waiting in your next lobby. So au revoir, and thank you very much for that. And good luck with your next meeting. And obviously Adam is staying on, so that's good. That's a great start. Lots going on there, and I guess very much in keeping with HPHPe principles. Going to move into mainland Europe now and hear from Katie from the Golfe du Morbihan Regional Nature Park. And she's going to talk about the developing work in that park, and also some reflections on what's happening in the French section more generally. Katie.
Hi everybody, some of you know me when I was working at the French Federation of Regional Nature Park in cooperation, but since January I moved to the Regional Nature Park Golfe du Morbihan in Brittany, and I am currently working to launch a small program on health topic. And in the room there is Patrick Camus, which is my elected official, which is a councillor in the municipality of Plougomelin, member of EUROPARC, and is my referent in biodiversity pole in the park. Okay. So it's a small view of our territory, which is located in Brittany in the department of Morbihan. And we've got 33 municipalities, which are all around the Gulf, and also retrocoastal parts, and which are counting with almost 200,000 inhabitants. Each regional nature park in France is leading by a charter, which is a territory project for 15 years. And ours is including an orientation about education. And inside this park school project, we have a project which is integrating an eco-health approach to promote adaptation with to climate change. So the park wanted to link eco-health, which is a new topic for the park, and action which is already led in climate change. And the park has been reflecting for a few years in think tanks, seminars, and internal sessions to raise awareness and also work on what is health and what can be health in a regional nature park. So this led to a project which is mobilizing regional actors of EUROPARC for a positive transition to health and well-being. And we are supported by our region, which has launched a call for projects. So this allowed us to hire my profile to work on this for this year 2022, and then see with local actors if there is a will and on what topic in health we will work on the next years. Okay, so for this year, the project is called My Park, My Health, and we have 3 specific goals. One is to build from scratch a specific health governance, because parks are working with economic sector, association, municipalities, but we are unknown from the health experts, and we don't have contacts with these publics. So we are trying to make a steering committee which is progressively growing. We launched it in March, and then we are adding some experts in planification and health, but also education, environment, and also doctors, to make a common view and common vision, common culture between all of us. The second point of this project is to reach mobilizing a panel of actors, the one who are well known from the park, but to speak health with them, and some new actors, which are doctors, healers, and other people. The goal is to share a culture about health and develop a common will to work on health inside the parks. So we launched some surveys, we've got some interviews, and we are organizing some workshops to share a common definition on health and see on which topics we are willing to work. And as health is quite a touchy and personal subject for everybody, so we are trying to experiment in parallel and illustrate what means working in health on our pilot project. So I'm working inside the team of the park on biodiversity, on light pollution, on education, and also with economical sectors to see how we can integrate health in the projects which are currently running. So the first great thing was to see what is health, and especially in a regional nature park, how can we approach this topic of health. So we are going from the definition of Worldwide Health Organization. So it's the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So it can be, all topics can be included, and especially the mission of EUROPARC can have a link with this definition. And also the park wanted to reach the One Health goals, which means we are working also on the interconnection between human health, but also biodiversity health and ecosystem states. So in the regional natural park, it's peculiarly accurate because we are trying to protect natural heritage. So one basis of work is to protect heritage and make it protected and well known and valorized for inhabitants. And the other point was to have a deep look in environmental healthcare, which means what are the determinants of health we can act on to influence positively or to limit the negative impacts on health in a park. So in the right side, you can see some keywords: air quality, water quality, but also what is viewing of nature from our house, contact with nature, sound pollution, food, housing. So every aspect of life can interfere positively or negatively with health. And we are crossing these topics, so these determinants, with the mission of the park and every structure we are working with, to see how each actor is responsible and how each actor can work on health with us. So it's the only first 6 months of the project, and we have working with in some workshops with association, with municipalities, and they have begun to discuss some target groups. So the overall intention is to take into account all the inhabitants, not to work for specific groups. We want to empower and improve the health of all the inhabitants of the parks. But they have discussed about 4 specific groups that mean have a special focus and attention about children, but also twins and teens, that are currently public, which is not so included in educational action and contact with nature. We are also willing to work hard on all disabilities, which can be physical, but also mental or another kind of disabilities. And another specific group is elderly, because some people are coming to Brittany and to the Gulf after their working period, but they are feeling quite isolated, so they are over health problems. The tools which can be used and which have been proposed by the workshops is organizing workshop about health for everybody, kind of practical workshop, to empower each people to know what is his health and how can everybody act on his own health. To build a network of professional and association so that every kind of actors knows each other better, medical sector, healers, and also environmental protection agency or municipalities. The goals will be to integrate health in each actions, make a diagnostic and build indicators to be monitoring the improvement and the action. What everybody has underlined is to adopt a positive approach, not to share health about fear or illness, but have a positive viewing. And also the importance of working in transversality all together and not in a separated way. Among the key themes that the workshop have issued, we have some 5 priority topics, which is contact with nature. And in the Gulf, we have the specific context to have also terrestrial nature, but also a maritime one. We have an island, which is managed by the park, so it can be a specific support to make some illustrating action. The concern is about water quality and quantity. Mental health has also been issued by the workshop, and adapted or physical activity. There are lots of other ideas, but we are not working prioritarily on them. And what is being investigating internally is our core work as regional nature park in supporting biodiversity as it is more and more shown that is the first health insurance for human beings. And in the park, we are fighting invasive alien species, but we are also working in natural grids, promoting nature in the city, and also what is about raising awareness, education, and citizen involvement. Some points are needed to be further investigated about the links in climate change and health, agriculture and food transition, and healthy urbanism. That are topics that we are working inside the park, but which are more touchy, specifically healthy urbanism, and we have to work internally before convincing and working it with our local actors. So as the Federation couldn't be part of the webinars, I made a quick look in our networks. So we are 58 parks, and some are currently working on health contracts. So we are Braine, Médoc, and Livradois-Forêt, due to specific local needed, that they lack medical professionals or their specific situation. Some parks are also involved in a national platform which is linking environment and health on small actions. We are linked in health with all food and agricultural practices. And also some parks in the north of France are experimenting payment for environmental services. And in my view, when we are talking about health, and especially One Health, we can't separate what is the doing for the improving nature and to keep services functioning, and also with human health. And to make a special focus on what is the French framework, there is the international One Health work about WHO and other international organizations. Then we are working inside the Green Deal for Europe. And at the French level, we have an environmental charter next to our French constitution, which has an article which gives the right to everybody to live in a balanced and healthy environment. This point has still needed to be put in practice. But at national level, we have also some plans, and one on environmental healthcare. And regional natural parks then are typically linked with One Health priorities, as we are protecting heritage, but also supporting sustainable local development. And this is some kind of the project and framework. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. Really interesting to hear about the project in your park, and also that sort of wider effort from the French section, which we haven't had much engagement with recently. So really good that you've managed to share that experience. I'm going to move us on just to the last presentation. Time is against us already, so if Marta could load up her slides and give her presentation, and we'll get into that discussion. But hopefully quite a lot of thoughts already emerging. If you have some questions for the speakers or general points that you want to make, please put them in the chat. Thank you. Over to you, Marta.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Marta Reguilón, and I work at EUROPARC Consultores, which is a consultancy company located in the region of Murcia, in the southeastern part of Spain. And I'm here to tell you about a project proposal that we have presented to the last Interreg Europe call that closed May, in which the EUROPARC Federation has participated and play an important role, and on which the Healthy Parks, Healthy People program also is very linked to the program. The project proposal has been called Sustainable Protected Areas as a Key Value for Human Well-Being, and has been promoted and led by the General Directorate of the Natural Environment of the Just a quick introduction for those who don't know about the Interreg Europe program. It is financed by the European Regional Development Fund, and its objective is to improve the implementation of regional development policies through the exchange of experiences, innovative approaches, and capacity building in the identification, dissemination, and transfer of good practices among key actors of regional policies. So the main objective of the program is to improve the policies at European level and to promote the exchange of experiences and practices. It has two main groups, which aim to achieve a smarter, more connected Europe, greener Europe, and more social, that is closer to citizens. And we have framed the project in the greener Europe topic, and specifically in the objective of protection and preservation of nature and biodiversity, about green infrastructures, pollution reduction. One of the requirements of the Interreg Europe proposals is that the consortium must include at least one partner of each of the 4 geographic areas of Europe. So we have in the south, as the coordinator, the General Directorate of Natural Environment of the region of Murcia. We also have the Public Institution for Management of Protected Natural Areas of the Dubrovnik-Neretva County. In the east, we have Podkapaki region. We have a Press of Self-Governing region in Poland and Slovakia. In the west, we have the Northern and Western Regional Assembly in Ireland. And in the north, we have Kullabergs Natural Reserve in Sweden, and EUROPARC Federation as an advisory partner. This type of partners participate in the project to play the role of giving advice and offering a concrete capacity to achieve the project objective. The project arose from the necessity of fighting biodiversity loss, which is in line with the European Biodiversity Strategy of 2030. As we have mentioned already, the protected areas in Europe are very relevant. We have many sites that are designated as such, and there is a clear link between nature and human health and well-being. Nature managers, especially here in Murcia, have seen that there has been an increase in visitors after the COVID crisis. So they have identified the need to adapt the management to contribute and give a space and services to all the citizens that want to go to these areas, but without compromising the environmental goals, which are the goals that these areas were designated to meet them. So there is a need to remove the environmental barriers and to design friendly spaces. There's a lack of networks between stakeholders, and also we have seen that communication programs normally focus on communicating the natural values, but don't emphasize so much the impact that protected areas have for citizens' health. So our project aimed to make EU regions more biodiversity resilient by improving the management of European protected areas, by strengthening the links between biodiversity protection and human health and well-being. So there are some sub-objectives, which are to increase the knowledge and capacity building of European regional public authorities in different thematic areas, which goes from improving accessibility, finding more funding opportunities, promoting nature-based interventions to attract new target groups that are normally not so much attracted to these areas, to improve capacity building to protected areas managers, to communicate the benefits for mental and physical health, and to develop new technologies in protected areas. Also to develop networks that enable collaboration at a strategic and operational level between health, environment, and other stakeholders, and to identify, transfer, and adopt innovative and successful good practices and lessons learned that improve the policy instruments and create appropriate regional context to maximize the links between protected areas and health. So this is the structure of the project. It will be 4 years. the structure is common for all Interreg Europe projects. We have 3 years of what is called the core phase, which is focusing the exchange of experiences. First, the identification of the good practices, then the inter-regional learning and exchange of these identified practices, training, and the development of action plans to implement them. And then the follow-up phase, which is to monitor if this has been successful and how this can be implemented in the reality and can be reflected in the policies. All this goes accompanied by communication activities, both for citizens and also for other stakeholders. So in the case of the Green Health project, the core phase will be to identify, select, and transfer the best practice among the regions. And EUROPARC will play an important role here, supporting and developing capacity building sessions that will be based on the use of this Healthy Parks, Healthy People toolkit, and will also coordinate all the communication activities. Living labs will be formed in each region and will be composed by regional and local stakeholders. And these groups will be set from the beginning and will meet 1 per semester. 3 interregional learning workshops will be held in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th semesters, so partners can transfer their best practices in each of the thematic areas that I mentioned. And of course, then project meetings and study visits, so partners can have a deeper knowledge about each of the country context. And then we have the follow-up phase, the last year of the project, which will serve to monitor how all these activities have improved the policy instruments targeted by its partner and how can also be transferred to other regions. And we will also implement probably a pilot action as a small scale test of good practice of one or more of the good practices discovered. We will use online, what we have called online and green and healthy coffee breaks to monitor the implementation of the action plans at local level and the transfer of good practices. So if one region is imported from other region, then these 2 regions will have meetings to see how this can happen in reality. And we also hope that these learnings can serve to update the Healthy Parks, Healthy People program and toolkit, and that this can also be presented in a congress so everybody can learn about what we have achieved. We hope that the local living labs can be consolidated. They will keep meeting in this follow-up phase, and we hope that they can be maintained also once the project ends. So just to summarize the role of parks and protected areas in the project, you can see that some of them have been already included in the consortium. So some of them will participate as partners, and others will participate in the local action groups, what we call living labs. They will be part of the living labs, and they will be invited to participate in the interregional learning workshops and in all the project events. The same for the health sector. We hope to deliver the impact of the project in the health sector by making them participants of the local action groups of these living labs, and also inviting them to attend to interregional learning workshops and to project events. And of course, we hope that with the communication activities, we hope to making them aware of what we are doing. And with all this, we expect to create linkages between health and environmental policies, and to have an impact both from the environmental and the social perspective. So the protected areas can be revalued, and society will demand their conservation. And this will also mean that more funds can be allocated on them, and that the citizens will be able to enjoy them. And to conclude, we see a clear relationship between the Green Health Project and the implementation of the Healthy Parks, Healthy People program. We think it's a major opportunity to maximize the use of the tools and the methodologies that you have been created during these last years. We also hope that the innovative that innovative best practices can be identified in these regions and these 4 years of project implementation, and that they can be probably incorporated to the program and to the toolkit and benefit other regions. We think it is an opportunity also to EUROPARC to maybe create a network in other areas of Europe that are currently less active at the moment, such as East Europe or South Europe. And of course, we hope it gives budget and opportunities to organize events and capacity building workshops aligned with the Healthy Parks, Healthy People priorities. So thank you, everybody. If you need more information, we are available for you. And we have our fingers crossed to implement this in reality. We hope to have good news soon.
Thanks, Marta. That's a really interesting project that we should stress that it's only a proposal. So fingers crossed that it gets through the various hurdles. And we're also aware that other European level projects being discussed, both Interreg and Horizon projects as well. So quite an exciting time. I can't see many questions in the chat. So does anyone want to have any other comments to the 3 presentations on my earlier presentation? Are there any questions that points of detail that people want to dig into a little bit? If so, either put them in the chat or raise your hand now. While you're thinking about that, Esther, I think it's probably, let's do the poll, the first of our Mentimeter polls. I hope you like Mentimeter experience. So we'll just run a quick poll just to get the discussion going.
Okay, so I put the link in the chat, or you can also use the code when you go to menti.com. And the question is, what project activity are you thinking of undertaking to develop HPHPE practice in your protected area or region? And you can vote by putting 1 dot to the topics below, and that would best summarize what you're working on. So I already see some things coming up, and I'll share my screen so people can see what's happening. Okay, so far, a clear winner. And if you have other projects or ideas that or activities that you're thinking of developing or already developing and you want to share them with us, then do please put them in the chat. And I guess, Peter, there will be some time to discuss that as well. Yep. in the upcoming half hour. Okay, I'll just give it a few more seconds for people that have not yet been able to vote. And then I'll stop sharing and give Pete the floor. Thanks for giving your input. Oh, still some popping up. Good. It will stay open anyway. So if you are still considering what you want to vote, I'll just stop sharing so we can semi-stick to the time that we indicated. Good.
Okay, that gives us a feel for what's going on in the with the colleagues around the table, and a clear winner for the developing partnerships with the health sector, but also some interest in monitoring and evaluation strategy and other. If anyone who put other wants to put that in the chat or wants to come in, that would be really helpful to see. I'm intrigued, I think, or what should we say? The projects we've talked about are really integrated with HPHPe principles, but the things that came out for me were slightly different or reinforcing. One was about the well-being economy that Dan talked about in the Cairngorms. and how, as he said it, the economy working for people rather than people working for the economy. And I think Kathy also touched on that. So it's integrating the work on health in terms of that wider economy. I think is an interesting theme that we might want to explore. Kathy, there was an awful lot in your work program, but the thing that stood out for me, I think, was the 2018 to 2021 period of discussion and scoping that you went through. And I think there's useful learning there in terms of this does take a long time in terms of establishing partnerships with the health sector and others. And actually, one of the reasons for that is around the sectors are quite removed from each other. The language is different, our priorities and preoccupations are different. But also, I think the other thing you picked up really well in your presentation about the prioritization of effort. And that we need parks and protected areas need a clear focus to what they're doing. So trying to prioritize effort and activity, and particularly around the key groups that we want to be working with and for, is really important. And I guess the third thing that came for me from the chat, actually, there's two colleagues from Germany who we've managed to connect through this meeting, who want to learn about the projects they're doing in their respective parks and sharing. And I guess that also came across at the recent World Cafe session that we ran at the EUROPARC conference in Austria, where we had colleagues from Finland and Austria talking about dementia projects in national parks, echoing what Dan was saying about the Cairngorms, and a colleague from Greece who wanted to know more about dementia projects because that's the area they're beginning to focus. So I guess it's how we make those connections between the various projects that are on similar topics and issues across the EUROPARC family network. I guess the final thing in here is I'm really intrigued about whether this is all familiar stuff or whether there's other activity going on which you think would be useful to share, or whether you think there are any gaps from your park or protected area perspective that would be useful to focus on. So there's a series of things in there. I'm hoping someone is going to pick up and run with one of those themes. Are there any observations or comments on those themes or others that we can tease out on? Okay, I'm gonna pick on people then, if that's okay. I think Elana from Sweden is here. Do you want to say anything from your perspective? We've talked outside this meeting about a sort of unsuccessful project that you were trying to run. Wondering whether you want to reflect on that and perhaps think about how some of the material that you heard this morning might be useful in terms of moving that forward. Sorry to put you on the spot. Do you want to come in?
I don't think she's in the room, Pete.
She gone?
I think she has left.
Ah, okay. Apologies for that. And then Katrina or Steph, from Germany, do you want to talk about the projects you're involved in? Just very briefly, and what are some of the key similarities or differences to what we've talked about today?
Yeah, I think Katarina was, first of all, hi everyone, good to meet you. So I think Katarina just replied on the chat, and I think the project we're currently running here at uni is a bit different in a sense that it's not directly related to parks, or at least not to parks in more rural settings, but really is centered on an urban context. And what we are trying to do is really understanding from both from a social science perspective and from a natural science perspective, what are the elements in different green spaces in the urban area that affect human health and well-being. And what we're doing is, first of all, looking at different green spaces, understanding what kind of species are present. We're especially focusing on trees there. And then we'll also do surveys with people using the green spaces and trying to understand what are their feelings that they're having when they're in the green space, and also trying to understand what is the purpose, why they're coming to these different green spaces. And that way we want to try to develop some recommendations for spatial planning, especially here in the area of Munich, but then we also want to try to make that transferable to other cities.
Thanks,
so I guess
Steph.
yeah, especially the methods that we're using are probably transferable or connect well to what is happening in parks, also in more rural areas.
Yeah, and I can
it's interesting to join today.
Okay, well, certainly good connections to sort of 5 ways well in there. Are you measuring health outcomes from that engagement with people, or is it?
And maybe in a later phase of the project, so we've just started and we're still scoping actually.
Okay. The difficult bit, of course, as we've probably identified. Katerina, do you want to say anything about your Biosphere Reserve project?
Katerina just put in the chat that she's having mic and or technical issues. But Katerina, I was just writing in the chat, but maybe because I saw that you mentioned quite an interesting project. If you have a link or a website where there's more information, then do feel free to share that in the chat, or maybe write a little synopsis about your project in the chat as well, if you want to.
Okay, thank you. Also in the chat now, there's a dialogue about food. Xavier, do you want to come in and just talk about, I guess, how you might address that question about how we put food and the relationship between food, health and nature into this equation that we're talking about today? Do you want to come in or not, Xavier?
Javier.
Hmm?
Javier.
Javier, sorry. Okay.
He's switching his video on.
Ah.
I'm sorry. Please tell me.
Well,
sorry, please tell me.
Well, you've asked the question about where does food and nature fit into HPHPE, and yeah. I guess we're saying it's in there, and I think some of the work that Katy talked about at her park level will connect to that. Potentially the Cairngorms project connects to that too. Adam, you might want to talk to refer to that, but I'm just wondering whether you have ideas or experience or reactions about how we might do that, make more of that in the program and food project activity.
Well, what I mean is usually we are talking about how nature can help us about our health or well-being. And then in our case, we are also working in how food or any cultural action can also help us in the sense that we are working, for example, in a program called Park on the Table, which it means that we are working with farmers, agricultural restaurants, about how we can help them to maintain his activity inside the natural park area, which is going to help our natural context and also is going to help them to survive. And also it is going to help people about their own health, about what they are eating. So they are eating products from close, near food. And also something about how for example, different arts. I'm talking about music or sculpture or painting So we are manage several equipments, buildings about these kind of actions inside the parks. Can also help people to understand the meaning of nature in this context. So I understand there are different levels of action about these, healthy park, healthy people. But in my opinion, they are also interesting to help us to transport, to communicate, to express to society the whole meaning of nature and how people understand this meaning of nature. So they are different, maybe they are different languages, but they are all supporting the same vision. And I just wanted to ask about what do you think about that?
Does anyone want to come back to Xavier on that? And thinking, Adam, do you, obviously within the Cairngorms Park, I guess that wider cultural value of nature rather than the ecological value of nature is quite an important theme for the Cairngorms.
Excuse me, just for example, what I'm meaning, these last 2 years, we have been working with a municipality in one of the park we manage. And of course, we were working with them about forest bathings, and but also with the schools on that village about food, that we are recovering different vegetables on the park, which also help us about fire forest and how important is for that students to understand the meaning of that vegetable on the park, on the landscape. And they were also not just planting and knowing that vegetable on their school gardens, but also eating. So it was included on their meals at school. And for us, it's important to understand how nature keep us health and well-being.
I don't think, I think, is it about language here, I wonder, Xavier? Because I think a lot of the projects that I've come across, both in the UK and also elsewhere in Europe, try and do this sort of thing, take a that broader approach to nature. But is there something specifically that we're missing? I think that's a good question for challenge here.
I understand there's a different level. Yeah, I understand, of course. Okay. But I won't like to miss it.
To visit, did you say?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay. Adam, do you want to say anything about that and picking up that discussion about the well-being economy? I guess that is part of that wider discussion, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, I mean, I think perhaps rather than answer question, I'll maybe kind of pose the kind of challenges that we've got, and maybe that's kind of at the heart of the discussion we're having here a little bit, or we're skirting around a little bit here, is I think we can look at various projects that deliver, that are about, direct delivery, but the challenge we have and what we're trying to do within the auspices of the Cairngorms 2030 project is find all those golden threads that link them all together, and to be able to sort of adequately kind of evaluate that, monitor that, and demonstrate that. So in a sense, when we talk about the well-being stuff, the work that we're commissioning around about that is working with communities to identify those kind of cornerstone indicators of kind of of the kind of well-being economy. And that might be, local availability of local food. It might be, availability of different sorts of things. And we don't really know just yet, but we're going to have the challenge we're going to have to then try and broach is how do we link all these projects together so that, you know, those connections are kind of made, and that, you know, we're not working in kind of silos with a kind of health project doing its bit over here, a well-being project kind of doing its bit over here, and a kind of climate conscious community doing its bit over here. Because that's another part of KenCom's 2030, is working with communities to empower them to develop, you know, climate action plans at a local level. And again, that might bring in food, it might bring in health, it might bring in all of those sorts of things. So I think that's, you know, the challenge is at the coalface, we've got projects that deliver directly, but it's how do we link them to these kind of other agendas and ensure that those golden threads are in place.
Thanks, Adam. At the coalface, or is that just a place-based approach that you're trying to adopt? Because we all, and I guess that's a bit of
climate conscious these days. Yes, the direct delivery on the ground would be the bureaucratic way of saying it.
Yeah. Okay. And it's not, I guess, for me, that also comes back to the sort of HPHPe principle about having those national strategic frameworks which support that approach and allow that approach to be recognised within those national reporting frameworks too. And that's a struggle, I think, for us. Katerina's put something really useful, a bit more detail and a link in the project, a link to her project in the chat. So that's really good. We'll look at that after the meeting. I just wondered, it does raise another question worth a few moments discussion about links to academics and I guess what sort of networks we're establishing with academic institutions in Scotland. Certainly through the Green Health Partnerships, we've been establishing links to academics within those partnership areas as far as possible. And I guess to provide rigor to and we're doing that, to provide rigor for our evaluation frameworks and our monitoring of outcomes really helpfully. But it can be challenging, and it can cause issues in terms of project development and design, of course. Academic preoccupations may be different from park managers. I'm just wondering whether anyone has some experience to share about use of academic consultants in some of the monitoring and evaluation of the projects.
No one else wants to jump in, I can certainly.
Thanks, Carol. I know this is hot topic.
Hot topic, yeah, literally. Hot, very hot. Yeah, and I'll also take this opportunity to maybe throw throw something a little bit left field into the discussion, because I would be very interested in people's reaction to what I'm just about to tell you, because it is quite, well, I think it's quite controversial, but I'd be very appreciative of your thoughts on it. EUROPARC is in negotiations with a consortium for a Horizon Europe project, which is obviously very research based. We understand that. It has to be applied research, of course. And it's called Get in Nature. And I think there's a clue in the word there, get in nature. So it's really, and it's focusing on how can we actually measure the health outcomes of people's experience in nature. So for that reason alone, EUROPARC are very interested. Everything that we've talked about here today, we're looking for that evidence base in order to be able to input into those national strategic frameworks, so that we get the recognition of the importance of the connections between health and nature that we're developing. We've heard from some of you today, developing those projects at that local and regional level. However, as it's just said, sometimes the academic focus, it doesn't marry well with perhaps our more practical approach from the park's perspective. So here we are. I've been really trying to make sure that in this project, the nature part is as important as the psychological benefits. It's focusing much more on mental health and physical health, which again is a good thing. And they throw a sort of I don't know what the word would be, a bit of a bomb into the discussions I was in earlier this morning, where they want to change the focus of the project to digital nature. So from a parks perspective, get in nature means, how do we get people into the actual nature? How do we improve that nature, restoration and that whole discussion, you know, to get to enable people to get the best benefits. And of course, as EUROPARC, our focus is not cities. We're not the city parks organisation. We're parks and protected areas that maybe start on the edge of the cities, the peri-urban parks, and go beyond that. So our focus, it's not that the city parks are not important, but they're not our focus. And obviously we would want to question quality of the nature in some of the city parks. So the whole discussion has now opened up because they want to be innovative. The whole discussion has now opened up about creating digital nature. And how do we give people access to digital nature, and what benefits might that bring? Which for me takes you, even the project is not called Get in Digital Nature. It's taking you further and further away from touching, feeling, sensing, being in the actual nature. So yeah, digital nature. So that would be on screen, that would be on phones, that would be on apps, that would their justification for this is multiple. I don't have time to explain it all to you, but one of the justifications is some people just can't get into nature, so therefore we need to recreate that digitally so that they can also perhaps receive these health benefits. So I would be, it's not a discussion that we can take over for the rest of this morning. I'm sowing these seeds with you, and I'd be very interested for anybody who wants to give me some feedback or thoughts on that. But I would certainly like to hear your initial thoughts on that, because I'm still processing that information and I have to respond to it on behalf of EUROPARC in the next wee while.
So there's a specific question in there that people should think about and respond to or put in the chat. But it's also, Carol, a good example of what can happen with academic partnerships that
take in a very different direction sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Digital nature has a role, but whether it's something that we should be expending time on, I guess it would be my quick reaction to that. Okay. Just go back to our speakers, or the ones who remain. Cathy, I don't know whether you want to say anything more about the discussion we've had and some of the issues we've been raising in relation to your work in the French regional park.
Yeah, I think I would add that I support what Javier has said, that because all regional nature parks are inhabited parks, so we have natural part, which is very important, contact with nature. But if we are dealing with One Health concept, it's interdependency between human health and animal and plant health, which is including wildlife, but also agriculture and domesticated species. So in the priorities and on health, we have contact with nature, but in the daily work of the parks, we are working for years about agricultural practices, agroecology, and then in the last years about food. So this is a part for us which is already done in the parks and increasing in major issues. But what was new about health is to see the contact of nature as a benefit for health and mental health, physical health. But I think agriculture and food is very important, and also culture has been issued with my colleague because we have also to protect cultural heritage. This has not been shown as first priority in our workshop, but it's because of the constitution of the workshop. I add healers, municipalities, so the links is not so evident compared to nature and contact after the COVID crisis. So I think all the different aspects of health has to be taken into account, and then according to our type of parks and reserves, show its difference, and we have to prioritize. But agriculture and food is also connected to wild nature because of use of landscape management, pesticides, chemical products, and water balance too. So I think in all parks which are inhabited, we can't separate both.
Thanks, Kathy. I think that's a really important point about our parks. EUROPARC members cover a vast diversity of different sorts of parks and protected areas, from strict nature reserves and national parks all the way through to living landscapes, as we'd call them, and French regional parks encompass. So yes, beginning where you are is really important.
Yeah.
So there is no one size fits all here, and parks, we'd expect that diversity to be reflected in the sorts of projects and programs that come forward. I guess building on that, Marta, just final question for you about how do we encompass some of that diversity in that sort of multi-park, multi-nation project that you're developing? Because you could have a very wide set of outcomes from that project, given the parks across Europe that you're wanting to engage with.
Yeah, I was thinking about it now with the question of Carol about the technology and the digital nature, because it is one of the thematic areas that we were mentioning also in this proposal. And I think digital nature should be very important for monitor biodiversity and to see the evolution and how also nature is impacting human health. Maybe we could monitor, but like as a way to prove how important it is. But I don't think digital nature will get citizens closer to nature. I think what citizens want when they go to protected areas is to go away of that, to escape from the digital bubble in which we live in. And I think we should develop more the technologies, and the Healthy Parks, Healthy People program should include the technologies as a way of monitoring the benefits of nature for human health, but not as a way of reaching citizens.
Okay, so I guess that chimes with the project Steph talked about, how we use digital technologies. I think that's almost a steer, Carol. I can't see any dissenting voices on the chat. Okay, thank you all. I'm just conscious of the time. We're just about to run out of time, so we have one more Mentimeter poll for you to do, which Esther's going to run about looking ahead. Hopefully this roundtable has been useful, and the discussion at it and the presentations at it have set you thinking about what you're doing in your park and protected areas. So is there more that EUROPARC can be doing? So this is a question about support for you moving forward. Esther.
Yep, thanks, Pete. So I've put the link in the chat again. It's the exact same one as before, or you can just go to menti.com and use the code that's also in the chat. So as Pete said, this question is about what kind of support you need to develop project activities related to HPHPe. And it's an open question. So I think 250 characters is the limit. So feel free to have a little think about that. And you can put multiple answers as well. Even keywords are fine, of course, don't feel obligated to write a whole paragraph. So I hope everybody can access the Menti. Yeah, I see nodding, that's great. So I'll share my screen as well. And yeah, feel free to put any inputs or answers to this question.
Thanks, Esther. Always interesting to see how the results come up when we do this sort of thing, as well as the contents of a report research thing as well. Okay. While you're adding, I'll just say I'll start to bring the roundtable to a close. Thank you in particular for the 3 presentations that we've had. Really rich learning from there. And then we'll hopefully be able to capture the slides and put them on the EUROPARC Federation website, together with a recording of this, so you can reflect on the discussion in more detail. I guess we've had some discussion today, but I guess the learning for me is it's quite difficult to have the discussion that we need online. So we need to give a little bit of thinking about how we do this in future. Hopefully you found it useful. I certainly have, and it's got us thinking in the Commission. I think there are other Commission members here today about what we do moving forward. Carol, I think that's enough from me. Do you just want to say a few final words as the Rent-A-Meter keeps going?
Yeah, thank you again, Pete, and all who participated, both by presentation, by your comments, and most of all by just being present. We certainly very much want, this is very much an experimental meeting today, and we really, certainly this last question here is a mechanism to enable us as EUROPARC to find out how we can help you form partnerships that will form projects in the future, or certainly give you some inspiration and ideas about what you might do in your own park, your own areas. And we're interested in different ways in which we can, you know, help those networking opportunities arise. So although we might be closing our meeting now, the discussion is always open, so please feel free to contact us and we will be taking your ideas forward. Just a few sort of EUROPARC announcements, just to, as I say, in order to create those networking opportunities, we make the best use we can of online technology, even if we're not recreating nature spaces, and face-to-face opportunities now that they have become available to us. So just so you know, we are planning a webinar. Are we calling it a webinar? It'll be a webinar-y, workshop-y type of thing. Later in the year, we're going for November, so bear that in mind. I'm giving you plenty notice of that. So a more Healthy Parks, Healthy People focus webinar workshop will be in November, and we'll give you notification of that. So please just keep your eye on EUROPARC news and channels for that. But immediately, just to make sure that you, if you're not yet aware of it, to make you aware of it, is of course we have our second EUROPARC conference of the year, taking place in Argelès-sur-Mer on the border of France and Catalonia in Spain, and we will be there in the first week of October. Now, although we may not be specifically having a health workshop there, the issue around health and climate change in particular is going to be infused across the whole conference. So the early bird rate closes in 2 weeks' time, on the 15th of July. So if you really want to grab a bargain, get the best price, come to the conference, the EUROPARC conference in France at the first week of October. I would thank you very much, Esther, for putting the link in there. I would very much invite you to make your registration as soon as possible. This is a very unusual situation for us with a EUROPARC conference, in that space is limited. We have a limited amount of space in the venue, so it really will be first come, first served. So I really ask you to make some early registrations to book your places at the EUROPARC conference in France. And let's make sure the health topic is fully considered across all of our deliberations. So if we don't get the chance to see you there, which I sincerely hope we do, I very much would like to see you at some of our other online events that will be coming up, and where we can continue the discussion going forward. So again, thank you very much for your presence. Thank you for your inputs and ideas and thoughts. Please stay in touch with us, and we will continue the conversation by other means. Okay, Pete, so any last final words? Do you want to see the conclusions of the meter?
Let's just put the slide up just as we go. The message I take away from it is exchange is really valuable, so we need to think about how we do that. Knowledge of other projects is really valuable, and also there's some specific things about monitoring and evaluation and making the case, which we haven't quite touched on as well today. So I think, yeah, some familiar things here that we still need to think about as a network. Just to respond to Steph's thinking aloud on the project, whether it's relevant to us, I guess, Steph, don't know enough of detail about the project. It actually sounded parts of it sounded quite interesting, so it might be relevant. So perhaps we should, if you could share a bit more information about it. I know you've put the link in the chat, I think, so we'll have a look at that and we'll come back to you about that. But anyway, thank you all for attending. I know we're all busy people, and it's been a useful session today as ever. Thank you all.